It's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker today, the Honorable Ken Burke from Pinellas County Clerk of the Circuit Court and Comptroller. He was first elected in 2004. He was subsequently re-elected without opposition since. He is a CPA by profession. Prior to being clerk, he was also the president of Catholic Charities Housing Corporation for the St. Petersburg Archdiocese, and also served on the Board of Governors of Catholic Charities. He is also, as some may recall, chaired the Guardianship Improvement Task Force last summer. And, in my personal opinion, he is the leading clerk insofar as guardianship issues in the state of Florida at this point in time. So we're honored to have him here today. And thank you, Mr. Burke.
Thank you, Carlos, and thank you for the warm invitation to be here. Carlos is very dedicated to this cause. He did come and visit me in Pinellas County, flew up from Miami. We had a great visit, talked about the Guardianship Association and the role that clerks play in the guardianship process. It's great to be with you here today. I also want to recognize Lenny Burke, your incoming president. Matter of fact, if you just missed the business session, all this just happened like 5 minutes ago. I've made it official. But Lenny, congratulations. I look forward to working with you. I also want to acknowledge Gina Rossi-Scheinman. Gina has been so welcoming, does so much of the detail work, and we appreciate all you do, Gina, wherever you are. Oh, there she is. Always a pleasure to deal with, and as you know, Gina served as a member of the task force that we did have. And today I'm really going to be concentrating, oh, you have to get rid of that picture. Today I'm really going to be concentrating my remarks on the work of the task force and what we did and the purpose behind it, what we were trying to accomplish. The end result was this report here, which I'm going to talk a lot about, matter of fact, all about. And also give you the website address where this report is located. So if you want to read anything or look at certain points that I bring up and get more background, you can go and find out the detailed information which is contained in this report. Since I didn't write it, I can say it's extremely well written. One of our members who worked for the Attorney General's office and a former clerk of the Supreme Court were the co-authors of the report. They did a magnificent job. And I think the report it is more than just a report because it's cause for action too. And that's the main reason why the clerks want to form this task force, is to have action on this important issue. So again, it's an honor to be invited here today with you. And I really hope, I've tried to keep my remarks to around 35 minutes so that there's a good amount of time for questions and answers and comments. Don't hold back. I'm a big boy. I can take any question or answer or comment, and we want to hear them. So the better, the more vibrant the discussion is, I think the better it is. So I look forward to that part of our interchange. When we formed this task force, and the Clerks Association formed the task force, and this was really out of character for us to do such a thing. We're a ministerial office. We're used to just following the statutes and following court rules. But there was really no neutral party involved with this. We play a critical role in this, and we said, maybe we need to take the leading role since we're not seen on one side or the other on this particular issue. We don't have fiduciary or financial interest in this. So that was one of the main reasons why the Clerks Association undertook this. And it was not an easy decision because it's very costly to put a task force together. You need staff time, you have to do the logistics, you have to rent rooms for meeting, provide some lunch, all those types of things. The staff time was one of the main things. But we just thought this is such an important issue that we want to move the needle on improving things in the system in the state of Florida. And I think, as the quote says on this particular slide, Senator Bradley, who was a member of the task force, said it best. Florida doesn't need a good system, Florida needs a great system. And we should. We're known as the state with the largest elderly population, and this is something that we should always be a leader on. So the first thing we had to do is who was going to be on this task force. And we wanted to make sure we had as many different voices heard from around the state. And you can see some of the names there, the organizations listed here. 2 legislators, 3 clerks, a magistrate who practiced in guardianship, Veterans Affairs was represented, the Attorney General's office was represented, a former ward was represented, and he was an add-on, not initially part of it, but the group said we need to have a former ward here. A ward advocate, a Disability Rights of Florida representative, a retired guardianship judge, AARP, the elder law section of the Florida Bar, the reptile section, mainly the probate part of the reptile section of the Florida Bar. The Florida Public Guardianship Coalition was Tamara Cribben, who y'all know. Anthony Palmieri was the vice chair, and he's representing the statewide investigation alliance. I appreciate your good work, Anthony, on this. And your representative, Gina Rossi Scheinman, from the Guardianship Association. So all these folks were very dedicated members to this cause, and I think we did, you could see from the list, get a wide range of experiences and voices heard here as part of the task force. So that was very important to us. We also wanted to make sure, and I've been part of task force before. I've been in government now since 2005. And it is frustrating when task force gather together, issue a report, and no action takes place. And some task force meets for several years before issuing a report. Some meet more briefly. I don't think there's ever been a task force in government that's met this briefly. We started in July, ended our work in November. There was a purpose behind that. We wanted to have our report ready for the legislative session and legislative committee weeks. And so we did push forward and in a very aggressive manner. And I'll be real blunt with you. Again, y'all been around politics. I've been around politics. You have to strike when the iron is hot, okay? And what happened this past year? Britney Spears. And so every legislator who formerly never probably heard of the term guardianship all of a sudden expressed some interest, and you would say Britney Spears, and they knew exactly what we were talking about. And it's funny, I'll even share a story. I presented before our legislative delegation, and we had the manager of our office of Management Budget, Pinellas, was in the audience when I presented. And he said, I went home that night, was having dinner, and was actually telling my family about the comments you made, Ken. Look, I had boring comments to your family. He goes, my 15-year-old daughter probably can't name who's the governor, probably can't name our United States senator, but she said, oh, guardianship, you mean Britney Spears, since she knew about guardianships. So I know in politics, legislators act when there's current issues in the newspaper and when the topic is a hot topic. And that was one of the reasons why we did push forward to make sure this year that since there's a keen interest, that maybe there'll be a better reception on a report on improving guardianships. I also want to say that during the time we met, we had 8 meetings altogether, 2 of which were in person, 6 virtual meetings that were held every other week. Irene Rouse, is Irene here today? Oh, she's not feeling well.
She's virtual. She's at
Oh, hey Irene, it's good to see you. Hopefully you're keeping things at Pinellas nice and orderly. But Irene represented your association in an extremely professional manner and was one of the presenters during these meetings. That was the purpose behind the meetings, is to have different experts in their fields present. And we had judges present, magistrates, the Investigation Alliance, guardians. We tried to have every different element who wanted to present, who had something to say to us, present as part of the task force. We also had at each meeting public comment. And this is something in government that we're mandated to do. This was a private task force. This was not a government task force. But we try to observe the sunshine laws as best we possibly can. And public comments, I know, cause some consternation. For me, I'm so used to them, maybe I'm just numb to them because I've been in the business so long, you go to county commission meetings, and people can get up there and basically say anything. The only rule is it can't be racist and it can't be used profanity. Other than that, we sit there and we listen. If they want to talk about, trash on Jupiter and how it's affecting the United States in our county, we sit there and listen on the county commission and nod our heads as the people are speaking. So it's our role during public comments as any commission to sit there and just listen. Not to speak, not to comment, not to refute, but just listen. But I know that caused some consternation to people listening that maybe, maybe you should restrict these public comments. That's usually not the way it works in a government body. The main purpose was to make recommendations to the legislature. But also, when we got into this, we saw that not only do we need to make recommendations with the legislature, but we also need to have some amendment of some court rules or maybe some agency administrative procedure rules. So that's how we categorize our recommendations into 3 different categories: statutory, court rule, or other. And also, I want to let you know, we took very seriously the work of prior task forces and commissions dealing with guardianships, because that was important too. We didn't want to reinvent the wheel. So throughout this report, if you go to the website and read parts of it, you'll see we present our recommendations, we give the substantiation behind it, and then we bring up the past reports and what their view of that similar topic was. Again, building on the past work, and I think that was extremely important, and hopefully in the future, there'll be reference to this report when looking at various items to do with guardianships. We put our recommendations in priority order. Our top priority was the data transparency. This is extremely important. If you ask, and at one of the legislative committees this year, the elder law section of the bar was presenting, and one of the legislators from Miami asked an innocent question: well, how many guardianships are there in the state of Florida? And the elder law attorney said, I'm not sure, I don't know. Well, the answer is no one knows. There's no one knows there's no database which says how many active guardianships there are in the state of Florida. There's some historical records through court filings that we can look at, but no active record of how many are in each county. No one knows in a centralized database how many wards each guardian has. That's not captured in any way. So if a policymaker was to ask that question, or a judge was to ask that question, that record doesn't exist. It may exist in court record. When some applications for guardianships, you have to list your other wards, but that's not mandatory across the state, as there's no central database with that information. How many wards live in a certain county? How many are full guardianships? How many are limited guardianships? How many are guardianships for minors? There's no active database which contains this information. And if you think about effectuating change, how are you going to effectuate change if you don't have the proper data to begin with? So this was the top priority of the task force, is to press upon the legislature how important it is to have data transparency. The next item, and we put these recommendations in order, it was a pretty haphazard process on the order we put these, because some of it was just difficult to say, is this a higher priority than the other, but the data was no doubt, there was a uniformity among the task force, that was our top priority. The next is standardization, and this is frustrating to us as clerks. Each circuit gets to decide its own forms. So if you're a guardian who practices in Pinellas and Hillsborough, the inventories that you submit each year and the accountings you submit are in different forms. That shouldn't be. It's very hard, again, to have transparency and have data comparisons when the forms are being used are different across the state. And this goes back to a historical empowerment of chief judges doing things locally in a local manner. We're past that time in the state of Florida. And so this is something which I hope, this should have been our second priority, and I agree with it, but uniformity in forms, in procedures. One of the things that came up during the testimony of the task force was examining committees. And it seems like examining committees are structured, operate totally different from circuit to circuit, from county to county. And again, we said the consistency here and the standardization of tools to assist in their assessment for examining committees should be more standardized. The initial inventories and how those are compiled Again, a lack of standardization here. There's basically a lack of standardization in almost every aspect of the forms, of the court forms, and that doesn't allow much. When you start making comparisons and you don't have standardization, you don't have fair comparisons to make. The next thing is to the court monitoring process. Just like I mentioned with the inconsistencies that I just talked about in forms, we found that the monitor process where judges use to appoint monitors to look into specific items for a guardianship are handled differently depending on what circuit you're in. Again, we're a state. This is a state law that they're implementing, and the state law is implemented in so many different ways. In some circuit, there's probably a lot of y'all would say we have no monitoring process in your particular circuit because we found that true from the testimony. In some circuit, like in Osceola and Orange, I think that's the Ninth Circuit, they have a very aggressive system where they have a court employee who's paid to do the monitoring. There's no fee charge to the ward. In Palm Beach and Broward, they do have monitoring systems, but there's a fee charge to the ward for those monitoring to take place. In Pinellas, I can tell you they usually use our office, the Inspector General's office, for most of the monitoring that takes place rather than appointing a fee charge. So there's just no consistency to this also. There's a law, it's supposed to be implemented, but it's implemented in so many different ways across the state. And again, I don't fault the judiciary on this. They don't know it's different in other places. It's eye-opening to the judge who was there from Orange County that there's all these different systems and all these different ways of carrying it out throughout the state of Florida, because judges basically know what happens in their courtroom and in their particular docket in cases they're responsible for. Preserving the right and dignity of the alleged adjudicated incapacitated person. We all agree with this. I don't think there's a person in this room who doesn't agree. That's why you're in this line of work. Some consider, this is the Ken Burke editorial, this is one which is, I'm not as passionate about just because to me it doesn't have as much meaning, but I shouldn't ever give my personal comments here. But there was a lot of folks who just said that the term ward is a pejorative term, which may be offensive to some. And so the names we considered, none of which we agreed upon, by the way, persons under guardianship, protected persons under guardianship, protected persons served by guardianship, persons subject to guardianship. Again, no consensus on that one, but we just basically emphasized that there should be no pejorative terms to refer to the person who we refer to as the ward. This one, is a big topic, ensuring that the use of least restrictive alternatives are a priority. And this is something the legislature has addressed in the past. But again, there was inconsistencies on how circuits and judges were implementing this. We're going to get to a recommendation which talks about a lot of these inconsistencies and why there are. But healthcare advanced directive, durable powers of attorney, trust. This is something where some courts are giving great authority to these and other courts are not. And again, with the inconsistencies around the state, hearing testimony and looking at cases, because some of the times when we get testimony, you say, well, gosh, is the testimony correct? I tried, not all the time, my best when people said something that especially that I could check on in a court file. I did try to check on throughout the clerk's state with clerk's offices and saw that the testimony was true. There was inconsistency with and a lack of the judge saying specifically why they're throwing out those advanced directives, why they are being disregarded, and the guardianship is being formed. But the feeling was that guardianship should be the last venue in the line for a judge to consider that first, if there are advanced directives, that the person's decisions made during their competency should be respected. Our former ward, Michael, was very compelling when he talked about the supportive decision-making. I'll be frank with you, I had never heard of supportive decision-making before going on this task force. Now I've listened to probably 20 different YouTube videos all across the country on supportive decision-making. And it does seem appropriate at times for especially folks who are non-elderly disability folks who have the potential for having their competency restored or avoiding the guardianship through a supportive system. Y'all probably have opinions on this yourself and probably have had seminars on supportive decision making, but it's a topic I think is going to continue to grow as in this arena. Michael was very compelling with his story, by the way. He's doing extremely well. He's has a full-time job, seems to be doing fine and living a good life. And so Michael was a good member of our task force. He was not critical of the guardianship system. He just said there should be, we should look at it, and if there's better ways of doing things, such as supportive decision-making in his case, we need to examine that. So it was a compelling case and one we did take seriously. This is a controversial topic here. Let's face it, folks, the Florida laws, if you look at them on guardianships, were intended for someone, a neighbor, a family member, a close friend, a doctor, a pastor, says, gosh, a person I know was so sharp, and now mentally they're not nearly as sharp. I'm afraid they may be taken advantage of, and they may not make the best decisions for themselves. If you read the statute, that's how the statutes were drawn up. I don't think the statutes had the intent of hospitals forming guardianships to have people removed from the hospital. Okay. And I was surprised when I did just an examination in Pinellas County, the percentage of guardianships which were formed at the institution of healthcare facilities. Is their intent what I just talked about in the formation of the statutes? There's a person who's maybe not as capable as they once were, and needs guardianship formed. It is troubling when we heard more about this, about how many of these guardianships were formed by healthcare facilities, where they're paying the guardian, where they're paying the lawyer, is the same guardian the same lawyer, is there fiduciary responsibility and moral and ethical responsibility to the ward in the best interest there, or is it to the person who is paying them? It is a troubling conflict of interest. And I'm not saying in all cases it's bad. I'm just saying it's a troubling conflict of interest. It just doesn't meet the smell test at times. Am I sympathetic to the hospitals and nursing homes who are not being paid, who have a problem with a person and what do they do? Yes. But maybe there needs to be a separate set of laws that deals with that situation, which isn't the traditional guardianship way of the laws with the intent of helping a person in their time of need. It's more of a business decision here than helping a person in their time of need. We did not have good answers on this one. And probably this is one I feel a whole task force probably needs to be appointed with nursing homes and hospital folks on it, guardians and a whole array of people, all the interested people on it, to figure out how to make that process a better process. Again, I'm sympathetic to the hospitals and nursing homes. They have a business to operate, but is guardianship the way for them to accommodate their business need to have people removed from their hospital who are no longer hospital appropriate? This is a big one, which we all agreed with too. Enhanced education for everyone. And I applaud y'all for being here today, because part of what you're here to do is become better educated on guardianship issues and to make the system better. And we were very specific here to say this includes everyone, the judges especially. And folks, I've probably dealt with over 100 judges in Pinellas County during my time as clerk. We have 48 permanent judges, but so many have retired. And 18 years I've been clerk, and some have become judges and have since retired during the time. Judges are assigned to areas by their chief judge. And in Pinellas, you can be assigned to the criminal bench, you can be assigned to the unified family court, you could be put into civil, in family law. If you really make the chief judge mad, you get assigned family law. Just kidding. That's a tough area. And guardianship and probate. And we have 2 guardianship and probate judges in Pinellas County. That doesn't mean they have any background. As a matter of fact, one of our, nothing against one of our judges, he's a great judge. He had no background. He worked for the sheriff before being appointed judge. Then he went on to the criminal bench and then got appointed to the probate. So their knowledge base in this very odd topic. And let me tell you, this is an odd topic for a judge. Most judges are used to a defense attorney and a plaintiff attorney. A state attorney pressing charges and the public defender or private bar the other side. They're sitting there in the neutral party saying, bring on all this evidence, bring on all this case history, and I'll make a decision, or there'll be a jury making a decision. But my job is to have this conflict resolved by you both advocating in the best possible way on behalf of your client. The guardianship system is totally different. We're asking a judge to be a social worker, basically, after the appointment of the guardianship that takes place, and then after monitoring a guardianship. They have 0 experience from law school, 0 experience on the bench in doing that. As a matter of fact, if Ken Burke had my way, once a guardianship got formed, it would be removed from the court, and a state agency would be more involved in working with the guardian as far as the oversight of the guardianship, and only bring to the court when there is a possible need for a replacement of the guardian or our competency needs to be restored. But we're asking them to be social workers and doing a job that they're not equipped to do, in my opinion. Again, that's not the task force opinion, that's my opinion. It's a very awkward thing. Judges are best at resolving conflict, not oversight. They're not trained in that, they're not educated in that. By the way, we included in the education attorneys, family guardians, professional guardians, clerks, and examining committee members. We said every one of those issues of folks need better education and a constant commitment with education on the guardianships. And especially, I talked all about the inconsistencies. Well, we think education could help a lot with the consistencies around the state. There was also more transparency in the process of the Department of Elderly Affairs on their website and the information that they have included there on guardians. And I'm going to get more into that with the law that's passed. And also our last priority was the additional work groups in the future need to be formed to continually study guardianships and improving it in the state of Florida. I showed you our final report. This is it. It has the address where you can go to it. Gene, I assume these slides will be available to the members afterwards. So if you can get these slides, and this has the address, so you don't have to write down that long website, and you can see the whole task force report, and all our minutes from all our meetings are held on that too. The big thing is the legislative activity this past session. Our top priority is the database priority. And those of you who are involved in the legislative process know you can't have a whole bunch of priorities. You have to focus on one thing per legislative session. We are very fortunate that Representative Linda Cheney sponsored our bill in the House of Representatives. Colleen Burton, a representative from Polk County, was a member of the task force, and because of her leadership position, she did sponsor bills, so she recommended Representative Cheney to be our sponsor. Representative Cheney is also from Pinellas, so there was a connection with me there. And then Senator Jennifer Bradley from up in Clay County was gracious enough that she served on the task force she said, I want to sponsor the bill in the Senate, and she did. The bad news, and those of you involved in the legislative process will know this was very bad news, when we got our House assignment, we were assigned 4 committees. Usually that is the recipe for death. Of your bill. That's like, oh yeah, we love your bill. We're going to get so many committees to look at, because that means every committee it's assigned to has to take action on the bill for it to go to the next committee. And in the legislative process, and I know you had your lobbyists here yesterday. I don't see them here today. Maybe it is. They don't vote against your bill. They just put it at the end of agenda and never get to it. And that's how your bill dies. I mean, that's, because they don't want to offend anyone. If they can avoid having a vote on a bill, that's the better way to kill the bill. But our bill in the House got heard by all 4 committees. That took a heck of a lot of work. and it passed every single committee unanimously. We knew once it got heard, it was going to be passed. But the problem is it's going to be heard and it's going to be passed on to the next committee, including the Appropriations Committee. And that's the toughest committee because, like anything, involves money. And that's a tough committee, but that in the final weeks we got through there. In the Senate, it got assigned to 3 committees, which is it's the normal process. And it passed all 3 committees, including the Appropriations Committee. Unanimous vote. It then had a difference in language in the House bill and the Senate bill, and there was a lot of wrangling in the last week of the session to make sure that the bills said the same thing, because if they don't, the bill fails. Okay, so you make it through 7 committees, and then you have to make sure that your bill is reconciled, and it was reconciled, and it was brought to the House floor and the Senate floor and voted on unanimously. So what does the bill do? The bill requires us to provide certain information to the judiciary, and these are the fields that the judiciary were required to provide fields in this database bill. It was charged for the Clerks of Court Operating Corporation to build this database, and it's to be live as of July of next year, a year from now. And we're very dedicated to making that happen. And by the way, folks, just so you know, the clerks did not want to build this database. This was not, we wanted this to be built by the Department of Elderly Affairs. And one of the legislators, who remain nameless, said, I will kill this bill if that department does it. I want y'all to do it because I know it will get done. And that's what she said to me. So when you're trying to advance your bill, you agree. And that's what we did. Because this is a burden put on the clerks that we really, again, did not want. This was not, it also, from an ethical thing, we said, gosh, we're heading this task force because we're the neutral party. Now we look like we potentially are benefiting, which we're not. We don't want this benefit. It's a burden that's been put on us. At the same time, we're embracing the burden because we want to get the darn thing built and built right and built timely. And so this is the information that is required for us to provide for the judges. You can see it here again. When you request a copy of the slide presentation, you'll have it for you at your home or office. The public view part is the name of the professional guardians, the number of wards served by each guardian, the county of residence of such wards, the number of wards residing in each county, and the type of guardianship that it is. No names of wards will be used in this part of the public-based website. I just want to assure you of that. That was a point of contention. The wards' names, as you know, are public in our court files on the internet through an individual clerk's office, but on this database, it was emphasized not to have them. How am I doing on time, Carlos? Okay, thank you. I'll try to speak because I do have questions. Also, the other thing which I'm excited about, and usually those of us in government don't get excited when we hear the term OPAGA. OPAGA is the Office of Program Policy Analysis and Government Accountability. That's a mouthful. This is the legislative arm of a consultant to say, when we have an issue we're unsure of, we get assigned it to OPAGA, and they're supposed to research it and give us a report back. So I thought this was a very positive thing, because one of our recommendations is to have future task force and commissions, which I still think are needed. But this is the government saying, we're now having the government study guardianships on a regular basis, on an annual basis. And OPAGA has to give a report. Their first report's due in October of 2024, and every year after that, OPAGA is supposed to continually look at the statistical data and some of these items that we pointed out about inconsistencies and make recommendations to the legislature. So that's the legislature's own body, which it's responsible to them, saying, we want recommendations from you looking into this. So some of my fellow clerks thought, gosh, this is not a good thing, but I feel the complete opposite. I feel it's great to have everyone looking at this topic and making suggestions for improvement. The important thing here with OPAGA is making sure that they get the proper input from all the stakeholders. So I will challenge y'all, when OPAGA, and after 2023, when the database goes live, is for y'all to have a coordinator with OPAGA, have a liaison with OPAGA to say, we, as a Guardianship Association, want to provide the information so that you're not hearing one side of the story, that you're hearing the complete story, and we can provide that. So please use us as a resource. I really challenge you all to do that. I know as clerks, we will do the same thing. The Office of Professional Public Guardians has to have this information on their website. This is not part of the database. This is in the bill as saying what that office has to have. It's a lot of the same information I think is already available on their website, but I'm not sure of each of these databases. Anthony, do you know, are all these databases part of their current website? So anyway, they're going to be under this bill. They're mandated to do that. I heard yesterday you had a report on the State Investigation Alliance. I know Anthony's here. If you have any questions concerning the Alliance, he'd be glad to answer those. But I just want to give you a 40,000 feet level on that. When the legislature charged the office to do investigations and to have a hotline for guardianships across the state of Florida, and the clerks who have Inspector General's office, which is the recognized government entity that does auditing and that type of thing, investigations with very strict standards, put in a contract and proposal to the department to say, we can do that because we have the knowledge base, rather than maybe hiring a CPA firm or a management firm to do that. And the office selected the Clerks Alliance because of our database already, our way of the knowledge base that we had. And this is something we're constantly working on to improve, to make better. I know there's frustrations on the time period with reports coming out, but it's a very involved process before we can make the report finalized. So I just wanted to make mention of that. That really has nothing to do with the task force, but as a clerk and as part of that Inspector General's and part of that alliance, I did want to mention that. The future guardianships in Florida, I think a lot of the things that I just talked about will point to where things have to happen in guardianships. I'm excited about the database. The consistency of and building that consistency is going to be a challenge because it's hard to break old ways of doing things. But that's definitely something that we need to do. At this time, why don't we go ahead and open it up for questions, answers, comments, criticisms, praise. And here we have Phil Donahue in the front, going around. I see some of y'all remember, you're as old as I am if you remember Phil Donahue.
Hi, good morning.
And you're not old enough to remember Phil Donahue.
I was wondering...
Would you tell me your name and where you're from first?
Oh, sure. My name is Sarah Shoemaker. I'm a professional guardian in North Florida.
Okay, great.
I was curious as to how the data would be sourced. Is it coming from the clerks, and how would it be maintained and updated?
The vast majority will be coming from the clerks. We have right now what's called CCIS, it's Court Comprehensive Information System, where it's a government system. It's not available outside of government. Where we capture court data on every day from all 67 counties and it's sent to Tallahassee in a system. I've sent a list of data points that I pointed out here to our administrator of CCIS. And out of the data points we have, I think probably 3/4 of them are already captured in CCIS, which we'll be able to extract them from. The others, the clerks are going to have to be putting in more data points into into our local system, which then can be extracted to the state system. We don't think there's going to be a need for guardians themselves to put any information into the database. It's going to be mainly from the court file.
Okay, and as updated...
And Anthony, do you agree with that from what I said?
Where CCOC is looking at how they're going to implement it at this point. So.
And I've been appointed from the CCOC as the chairman of the effort to establish the database. So we're moving forward with this because a date of next July to implement this is an aggressive date, but we're going to make it. Go ahead.
And will guardians have the opportunity to look at their data prior to this to validate anything, make sure they're not needing?
No, they will not. But but the data is in the court file. So if the court file is incorrect, then you should talk to your individual clerk to make sure it is correct. And the data from CCIS is extracted on a regular daily basis. It's not like once a month, once a week. It's a real time or close to a real time thing. So if the data is corrected on the local level, it'll be corrected on the state level.
Sorry, one last question.
Sure.
As far as when a case drops off your list, do you know what that criteria might be, such as when the person passes or when you're officially discharged?
I don't know on that, and there's lots of procedural questions that we have to answer. And the way we're going to, and I have to be careful because I haven't even told my fellow clerks how we're going to set this up, but we're going to set up various work groups for the database, okay? And one of the work groups is a policy work group to make sure that the data that I'm going to ask a judge and to recruit judges to make sure that the data meets their criteria. We want to make sure we have an administrative process for people. When you change a form in government, and I don't want to talk about court forms, like a Bureau of Vital Statistics forms, and when we had the same-sex marriage, we had this issue. The form said husband and wife, okay? And when the same-sex marriage issue came up and we were allowed to start marrying people of the same sex, the form still said husband and wife, and people were frustrated and said, you know, it's not husband and wife, it's the same-sex couple. We said we can't change the form. The form has to go through an administrative rules process, has to have input, and it takes probably 6 months for this form to be different. Now, we would tell people just cross off husband, cross off wife, and put the names you want. We can't do it as government because that's the approved form. We need a similar process for this, and there's not a process established right now, but an administrative law process where people have the chance to have input, to say something, hey, that's not proper on it, the way you're presenting the data, and we're committed to doing that as part of our work groups.
So.
Thanks for those questions. And where in North Florida are you from?
Jacksonville.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So I want to give you a little insight about something that you discussed.
Sure. Can you give me your name and where you're from first?
My name's Beth Eaton Caparelli, and I'm from Martin County, Florida.
Okay.
So prior to becoming a guardian, I was a healthcare worker and in the administration of a hospital, very large hospital over in that area. And we requested guardianship all the time. So you mentioned it, so
Sure.
I figured I'd give everybody in the room the education why. The reason I became a guardian is because one of my neighbors was being exploited. And with that, I went to Elder Affairs, I went to the Sheriff's Department, I went to DCF. I couldn't get any intervention. I ended up taking her to the ER and having her admitted just so I had time to get my feet under me and figure out how to get a professional guardian appointed to her. And I think that the biggest problem with people is they don't know where to go, so they go to their nearest healthcare facility and kind of do granny dumping. And then we end up with them and we don't know what to do with them, how to get them out of the hospitals, where to go, who can make a decision for them, and that's when we pull in an attorney to get guardianship on the person when there's no children involved or anybody close nearby. So I just wanted to give you the other side of the aspect.
And that is a good other side. And my point was that the guardianship laws, you're talking about, it was the frustration that drove you to do that. It wasn't the way the system's set up to make that happen. And that's why I suggested we need a complete task force or study group or whatever, just on that particular issue of what you were talking about, the hospitals, nursing homes, how to avoid having to go through what you did, and having a better process for that. And the voices need to be heard on exactly, your type of voice needs to be heard when formulating that alternative plan of guardianships.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Lenny, that question?
Thank you for your presentation. It was very helpful. I practice in Central Florida, Orange, Osceola, Seminole, Volusia. My question to you is that some of the recommendations and the information you presented impact the judiciary or require action by the judiciary to implement. My experience, although it's narrow, says that every circuit is different, every judge is different, and they change from time to time. And so
all that's true.
It's a moving target for what we're supposed to do. And of course that's frustrating for us, but it's also costly to the ward when we have to do something one way in one circuit and something different in another circuit. And the impacts are substantial. In my practice, 19 years, I've never heard a judge say, what less restrictive alternatives have you considered, and why are they not appropriate?
They're supposed to do that.
Yeah, but I never heard that question. Now, maybe it was already covered in the pleading, and the judge was satisfied with that, but the fact that I never heard that question is significant. So my question for you is, what is your prospect, what do you anticipate will be the reaction of the judiciary to your report and your recommendations?
It's going to be mixed. There's no uniform reaction. There's judges, and I mentioned Judge Morley from Sumter County is a very aggressive voice to say things have to be done differently in the judiciary. And we're not very good at this topic. And is a big proponent of education and uniformity. There may be other folks, I'm sure, who feel, gosh, I run my courtroom the way I want it, and I don't need any outside help. So you have the different extremes. I think what's going to happen with the database is going to magnify the discrepancies and disparities of the way we do things in the state of Florida. And I think what grabs the attention of the judiciary, and I'm just being blunt here, is legislative action telling them what to do and direction. And so, hey, we need to correct our own shop before we be a right target for the legislature. And the legislature does their targeting through different ways, through direct laws to say, hey, you have to do this, judges, or they do it through the appropriation process. And so there's a judicial response. The beauty of our government, as Justice Scalia used to say, is not the Bill of Rights, because lots of governments have Bill of Rights. It's the checks and balances and the separation of power, which is 3 different branches. And that's what you have to make effective, even in this case, is that the checks and balances of the legislature over the judiciary, in addition to just doing the right thing. I think you start publishing reports like this, you show discrepancy, you have voices within the judiciary saying we need to change, all that helps make change happen too. And in my time as clerk for 18 years, I can tell the attitudes of judges have changed. That attitude, which I just said in a pejorative way, this is my courtroom, I'll do it the damn well way I want to, that has left for the most part. And the younger judges and the newer judges tend to be more responsive to saying, hey, there's a bigger impact to everything I do, my demeanor, the way I treat people, has to be much more professional maybe than it was 20 years ago. I'm not sure if you found that same thing, but I certainly do.
One question over there with Sarah, one question over here, and then we'll do.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I have 2 questions.
Would you tell me your name and where you're from first?
Sure. My name is Barbara Stone. I practice in Polk County.
Imperial Polk County.
Yes. And I also practice I have a home also in Broward.
Okay.
So I have guardianships, Broward, Dade, and I also do Palm Beach.
Very good.
I have a question.
Certainly.
When you were discussing that you were showing the different data collection, I noticed that it doesn't show restoration of wards per guardians. And I think that's important because the misconception has always been that guardians want to keep their wards in order to build them. And there are a lot of situations where guardians actually care about their wards, and if they feel that the wards should be restored, we do that. So I think it's important to illustrate that also in the data collection.
You're absolutely right.
My next question.
Let me go take that a bit further, okay? We have certain responsibilities. The legislature gave us what needs to be reported. This is not Ken Burke decides. There's other, though, and this is where I get back to the administrative law procedure or administrative rule procedure, to add additional things. This is where OPAGA comes into, and the administrative rules to say, hey, you're not capturing a field which should be captured. But they're going to be captured outside the database system, but the database system is governed by the legislature and what was passed. So that's what we have to keep it to. It doesn't mean we can't expand it in the future. And we will. I think that's an excellent idea, by the way. I definitely advocate what you're saying.
Okay, my next one is regarding standardization of forms. So how are you guys gonna do this? Because Miami and Broward have something that's called smart forms. And in their website, you can go in and you can do your annual accountings, you can do your initial plans, verified inventories, and so forth. I know that West Palm Beach does not have those smart forms. I also know that Polk County, Hardee, Highland does not have those smart forms. So in order for you to be able to gather the data, are you guys considering making the whole state smart forms? And if so, what I've noticed is the poor counties or the counties that do not get the most funding for the clerk's office, maybe they have not implemented this simply because it's not affordable. So where are they going to get the funds to do this system of smart forms?
I don't have the answer to any of your questions. It's going to take any type of movement like this, what we're suggesting, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? We're going to have to keep making progress here, getting the judiciary, the Chief Justice. The Chief Justice can make anything happen in the courts. Okay? If the Chief Justice said tomorrow, we're going to use standardized forms for guardianship, and here are the prescribed forms, that would happen. Whether they're the smart forms, whether it be some other type of form being used. Or, as I mentioned to Lenny's question, the legislature can direct the court to standardize their forms. There's no authoritative way right now, because right now the methodology says that a chief judge in each circuit can decide what forms they use for guardianships. That's the current in place practice. And so we take either the Chief Justice, the legislators, or the Chief Justices, or the Chief Judges from the 20 circuits getting together and deciding we're all going to use the same forms. Y'all can put pressure on them to do that. The reptile section, the elder law section can put pressure on them to do that if those sections want to. And I'm not sure if they do. But if y'all are unified in that, y'all should pass a resolution saying we want unified accounting forms and present it to your legislators and the judges and see what happens.
Where do they get the funding?
No, baby.
The funding, the legislature always can provide funding.
Barbie,
If there's a will.
we need to go to the online question.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Hi, online folks.
So we have a couple questions here, and I'm going to combine a few. The question is regarding education for family guardians. Is there any push to increase it? And then additionally, any movement to formally develop more support for the family guardians who are guardians, and FSGA we hear a lot from in terms of them, not needing more information and not feeling fully prepared.
Well, absolutely. I think we all agree with the education part. I think we've seen a trend, at least in Pinellas, I can't speak, y'all know better than I would throughout the state, where judges aren't waiving the education requirement for family guardians like they were. It seems to be trending where they are seeing the importance of education, because it used to happen in Pinellas, they would waive the family guardian education requirement all the time. And so that trend, if we could just get them to go to the basic education part. And I think circuits, and again, I can only speak for my circuit because that's all I know. We did 3 years ago have a big session that's just dedicated to family guardianships. And maybe that's what we need to do a better job at throughout the state of Florida, saying here's a criteria, here's a education packet, here's a way to do a family a guardianship education session, and each circuit should probably do it at least once a year, twice a year, once every other year, and have this offering, because I think we had over 100 people attend that session when we did it. And it was a good exchange too, because they not only was an education session, they expressed a lot of frustration that they had to the judiciary. So it was good for them to the clerk's office for us to hear their complaints and concerns too.
I'm just gonna go a little step further with my own question.
Sure, Gina.
And our members know, at FSGA for the last couple of years, we have been talking with, all of the stakeholders, our sister agencies, the state agencies, as well as the task force, about what we've all agreed upon, a large push for education that includes not only professional guardians, examiners, clerks, etc. And I guess my question is perhaps the clerk's office could give us a little bit of help or guidance, because after a few years of our efforts at getting this education issue recognized, we're not really getting anywhere. And frankly, last session, crazily enough, there was an 8-hour requirement for attorneys that serving regional councils. The 8-hour guardianship requirement was actually removed. So we saw in the previous session, things just go in a different direction. And if all of us are on the same page, that this education can benefit the practitioners as well as the wards, what can we do? What can FSGA and Guardians begin to do to find some other stakeholders who can talk with either the department about raising requirements, and also in the legislature? I feel that, we need some allies if everybody's in agreement.
I think what you just said is the way to do it. There should be the ethical way that we just do it because it's the right thing to do, okay? And if that doesn't work, then you have to mandate it. And it is through either administrative procedure or talking to your individual legislators. I mean, the most compelling voice and legislator here is not from a lobbyist. I know y'all may not believe that. It's from the voter back in their district. I mean, legislators listen to people in their district. And so you should have a relationship with this advocacy with your individual House member and senator. And if they hear the voice enough and repetitive, action will happen. But it's a shame we would have to rely on that. We should self-govern ourselves on these issues. I can tell you, and Anthony certainly can verify, the Clerks Association, the number of sessions we've had on guardianship over the past 10 years is extensive. I mean, we have constant education. Matter of fact, we have a whole 3-day session just dedicated to the Investigation Alliance as part of where we meet and talk about our consistency throughout the state of Florida, the way we're approaching things. And it's a constant effort. We're not going to get there overnight, but at least we have a pathway to get there and a destination.
No, there's obviously many issues we can discuss all day here and with you. So folks recall, FSGA did express a number of concerns during this process and tried to make actually your process a little difficult. But at the end, the passage of the final bill is something FSGA can support. But as something the clerk also alluded to, it needs to be monitored because there's still different issues to be developed and that can be included, as was pointed out back there. And so there are things that we can still continue to work on. And there's other things we we may not always agree. I think there's the issue of the hospital pipeline. It's maybe a myth, and perhaps that needs to be maybe discussed even more fully, as you said. But we are very thankful that you're here. Very much appreciative. It's very important to have these issues out so that we can all participate and be involved with. So thank you, Mr. Clerk Burke, for honoring us today with your presence.
I just want to say thank you for the invitation and the kind hospitality. What a nice idea to have a speaker's reception like y'all did last night. I want to thank the drink ticket lady. She was very kind to me. The food was excellent. And I just appreciate being with y'all. If ever I could be of help to you, please reach out to me. Thank you. Have a great rest of the conference.